Hey, this is Jay Kapoor.
Hey, this is Tim Cott.
Welcome to The Game Plan. So this week we're going to try a new format for the partner meetings, where we talk through a series of topics on a 2-minute timer. So Tim, I'm going to let you kick this one off with Mason Plumlee.
So Jay, let's talk about 8-foot mattresses and what it's like to have a friend who works in the foam cutting industry. I actually think the point that I find interesting here is like how valuable are gifts to other players on the team, and like what's the hit rate of how successful the gift is received. So you see guys like giving shoes, you see guys give like Xboxes, PlayStations, whatever. I'm sure like they're always happy to get it, but number one, these guys can all afford these things. So I actually think for that reason, the custom mattress probably ranks ahead of your typical gift and isn't even ranked on like a cost basis, but just on like unique access and the fact that he went to the trouble. I guess we could have asked him on the fulfillment of those mattresses. Like, did he have them just all dropped off at the locker room one day? But I imagine he just had them sent to each of the guys' houses.
Yeah, well, one of the important things to remember here is that he didn't actually make any money off of those mattresses. So there was that entrepreneurial spirit to go out and try to make a gift instead of, necessarily buy one. It'd be interesting to see if there is a market for 8-foot mattresses out there and whether Mason Plumlee could have been the Casper mattresses for NBA players, or even down to college players. But I think the more important fact here is that as a rookie, you want to find a way to ingratiate yourself to the team, especially that team that he came into with Kevin Garnett, with Paul Pierce, sort of these, these huge names that he grew up watching and grew up idolizing, and then to play with them, to actually come in with something that showed what a thoughtful individual he was. And you heard it in the interview that we had with him, that he is just so thoughtful about how he carries himself in every aspect of life, that I feel like the 8-foot mattresses was 100% on brand for him.
All right, next topic. Should athletes be investing in healthcare?
Yeah, well, here's my thought on it. We talked about this a little bit. Healthcare is such a long development cycle, whether you're talking about pharma, whether you're talking about medical devices, software, sure, there's a little bit of an opportunity where you might be able to build something that gets acquired or scooped up early and you see an exit. But Mason's an early stage investor. A lot of these athletes are early stage investors. It takes them so long to see a return on this capital, and these are illiquid assets. And so, one thing that's really important is that it's not a massive percentage of his overall portfolio. He said about 85% goes to real estate, goes to, other sort of safer private equity options. And then he has a discretionary 15%. So for him, what he's trying to do is use that as his learning platform. So yeah, maybe he's not going to make a ton of money or see a lot of that very soon on healthcare, but it doesn't matter because he's learning about a category that he's really interested in, like healthcare.
Yeah, and back to healthcare specifically, I think for me as an investor, I have a really hard time looking at those types of opportunities, but it's because I have no working expertise or experience in that category. So for him, he talked about it, like he grew up in what amounts to the nation's capital in orthopedics, right? And his family, both his parents and his extended family, all work in healthcare as well. So he's got people he can turn to, ask the right questions. Hey, is this something you'd use? If it is something you'd use, like what's the path for this to actually get to market? So he has a diligence process in place for that. So I like that he's investing not just in something that he cares about, because you mentioned the piece about how it's the great thing about healthcare is it's more than just a return on investment. It can actually make an impact, but also something that he has access to really smart people about.
Well, let's take it from healthcare to sports. Tim, is sports actually investable as a venture capitalist?
Well, I go back and forth on this. I mean, truly, I am an investor who's made plenty of investments in sports. But as Mason mentioned, it's got to be used as a validator, not as the end-all, be-all. So I want to see opportunities where sports can serve as maybe a proof of concept or as just like a whole nother sector that the product can attack. But it shouldn't be the end-all, be-all, in my opinion. I'm sure there's exceptions to that. Like if something like BAMTech is the most successful sports exit of all time. But even that went beyond, like, it was less a sports company as it was a streaming company, right? That just used sports as the category for it to really break through. So I think that's how you have to frame it. especially as a venture investor that's looking for exponential return, is that it's got to expand beyond sports.
I'll pose to you that I think sports is more investable as an athlete than it is for a venture fund. And the reason I say that is because venture funds have to return on a power law basis, and they're looking at having at least one major home run in their portfolio to return that fund. But when you're investing as an athlete, you don't have a 3x hurdle rate, right? So for him, if he can do a couple of sports investments, he can start to bring in his network to bear. He can start to bring, as he said, that advisory and that perspective for these founders that maybe don't understand the athlete's perspective, but have a really great product, have something that's, a great tracker or some sort of great, med device for athletes. He can provide that perspective, and he can see a significant return above the market that maybe wouldn't make sense for a venture fund, but makes a ton of sense for him. So I think the question maybe is sports investing investable for athletes? And I would say yes. Yes, it is.
I think it's a great point. So we talked about the Founder Series, Mason's show that he does on Facebook Live. Your thoughts?
Well, this is another thing, right? What is the value that he is bringing to his portfolio companies? And it turns out these aren't even just his portfolio companies. These are just founders that he has met through his travels. He is bringing a platform. I love the idea of him just saying, I didn't really think I was going to get anything out of this. I just wanted to give it to the founders. And again, it's like his ethos, how he carries himself. I think that's his giving personality that I really loved. And, it was funny because we talked about like you're going from connected fitness to Bitcoin. Like, how do you feel like you get smart as a host about that stuff? And I'm sure he's still figuring it out. But I just love the enthusiasm and the curiosity that he has. And then also the giving nature to want to elevate the stories of these founders. Most importantly, the lesson that I really love that he learned is that founders can come from anywhere. They don't have to come from a tech background to be a tech founder.
Yeah, and he was smart. It was born out of the fact that the NBA went on hiatus. And as he said, he's like, I needed something to do. And that's okay, right? Like if it can just be born out of something like that. So it'll be interesting to see how and if he continues to do it as basketball comes back and he has to focus on that a bit more. I hope he does because I enjoy the show. I hope that he tries to dig in a bit more on how he could spread its distribution, promote it a bit more. I think Facebook Live is an interesting platform for it, and I think it works well with his schedule because he can just do it. It's 15 minutes, 20 minutes, and then the episode lives on beyond that. But if it is something he's going to continue to put time into, I would love to see him think about other ways that it could get out there, whether that's through YouTube or having the companies promote it a bit more. I think going beyond, just his fan base of people that follow him on Facebook will be a way to really unlock the potential he has with the Founder Series and to continue to be taken seriously as an investor and somebody who's passionate about this space.
And he can start to build his brand like that, right? And so that comes back to our last point now where we finished with him, which was the wisdom of Kevin Garnett and the advice that he got. So Tim, what did you think about that?
Yeah, so leveraging your position as an athlete for access is something we talk a lot about on the game plan. And it seems so obvious, but I don't think our listeners, especially those who are pro athletes, can hear it enough. You've got to leverage the opportunity you have while you're an active player because it's night and day from when you're active versus the day you retire. When you're an active player, anybody in the market you're in will pick up a phone call because people are sports fans. So how can you leverage that for learning, for meetings, for expanding your media brand? We've seen athletes with their own media companies and they use that as a way to bring guests on. So obviously basketball or, your sport's your core focus, but leverage that platform you have for more access.
And part and parcel with that is that you have to have thought about what it is you're interested in, right? If you are interested in healthcare, you have to have thought about that before you can start reaching out to healthcare professionals.
That's right.
If you're really interested in commerce, you have to have spent the time and energy to learn about that before you start reaching out to leaders in e-commerce. So I think that's the corollary to what Kevin Garnett and by extension what Mason is sharing as advice, which is use that time now to start thinking about what is of interest to you, because you don't want to wake up the day that team routine and your competition are taken away from you and now start to figure out, what do I do with my life? You start thinking about that early and you start putting some pen to paper. Now you can start to build a network of experts around you. So Tim, I think that's a really great place to leave this week's partner meeting. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
That's all I got, Jay. Thanks for joining me on the rundown.